The Esperia Chronicles with DangerGrey and Mysaldate on AFKwDG on Twitch. The Esperia Chronicles proudly presents The Forbidden Family and the Age of Arcana. Hey guys, it's Danger. So, as you'll hear in the episode, when Mysel and I first attempted to do this, it took something like 5.5 hours for us to try to get through all of the readings and discuss the lore. We came back around to it I think it took us just over 3 hours to do. I've got it down to just over an hour here. If you'd like to be totally filled in on all of the material that we're discussing, there's a list here for you of all the sources that are included. And we're going to provide a list every week in the future. And you can actually listen to my readings of many of these sources right here on the DangerGrey YouTube channel. The Haelus story, the Metallurgist diaries, and most of the primary sources that we'll be using for this and other episodes in the future. I'll try to get them up for you early as I can in the week so that each weekend you can be right there with us following along and know what we're talking about if you're not someone that reads them on your own. The only other thing I'd like to add before this plays is that we think of this in distinct periods, which you can see on this timeline I kind of freeformed for you guys here. So those break down as the Age of Arcana, or the era of man-gods, which is referred to as about 2,000 years ago. And then 13 years ago, the weapons are discovered. The Forbidden Family spends 3 years together. Then Eugene and Gavus are imprisoned for 10 years by their respective factions. Spoiler alert. Then we have the War of Truth, and then now, in our current time period, which is post-War of Truth. Thanks for checking this out. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Stop by the stream and say hi. We absolutely love discussing the lore with you guys during the show on the weekends. And I hope we'll see you there soon. So, we've got backstory with Haelus and Gaius the Guardian.
Yes, so from Haelus's story, that's where we first meet Gaius, and he's introduced as Haelus's best friend. As the story progresses, we see Gaius kind of get more power hungry and more violent to the point where it's implied that he blew Haelus up to have a reason, to have an excuse to go to war.
Oh yeah, they use that as the excuse to go to war. He blows up his best friend Haelus.
Yeah, he does.
I didn't realize that was the excuse he uses to go to war. That's excellent.
I think there was in the story there.
Yeah,
was
no, because you're right, because because then Haelus is turned into this martyr, and it's the that's a classic tool from human history, is like attacking your own side to make an excuse to go to war over it. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we first meet Haelus, and that kind of speaks a lot. No, Haelus, sorry,
Gaius. Yeah, Gaius the Guardian.
Gaius, and that speaks a lot about his morality. And
his character.
His character, exactly. So when we next meet Gaius, that is in the metallurgist Nikolai's diary. And
which it's so weird that in Liberta's story it specifies an unnamed metallurgist, even though they gave us his name back long ago. Nikolai.
His name was also erased from the record of the diary.
Yeah.
So who knows? Maybe there is.
Maybe they're gonna change it. Is what I was thinking. Maybe they're gonna make it something else. Yeah.
I think it would be very cool if, for example, we got him as a character at some point. I don't know how it would work.
I was wondering if that's maybe why they changed it. If maybe that's why they changed the name, or took the name away. Yeah.
It could be, because we have seen characters who should be dead kind of become playable. Haelus himself is a huge example of somebody who died and then was kind of brought back, and now we have him as
Oh
a
man,
playable character.
I love his story and the way that his broken body gets turned into a it's really neat the way that it describes it at the end of the story. And if that story sounds interesting, we did a reading of that story, and you guys can find that on YouTube on Haelus, the Esperia Chronicles. So if you want to hear it, it's up. Check it out. So look for that this week as well.
So it would be interesting to see what they do with the metallurgist. Maybe Nikolai, maybe not Nikolai. I would be interested in seeing him potentially returning to Esperia either as a Graveborn or as a Hypogean. I think those are the two most likely factions for him.
Oh yeah, he'd be a
Unless
great Hypogean.
he really would, unless Lilith comes up with some lore reason to keep him around as a part of another faction. I think it would be very ironic if, for example, as sort of punishment for what happened at the Cradle of Truth, which we will get to later, if he was part of the experiments on humans that happened later on, and if he returned as a Mauler. I think that would be very cool. Very unlikely, but very cool.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because the Mahler experiments did come after this, huh? That's how the gods
They
ended up
did.
stopping humans, was by having an eye trick them into thinking they could become immortals. And then they started experimenting on each other and eventually created weird animal people, gene splicing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
um, and
But
yeah, that'd be
for now,
interesting. Yeah, he becomes a Mauler. So you're right. He could become any of the faction. Well, except probably Wild. I don't know. He could
yeah,
inject him
I
with some
don't,
lamb DNA. It's Namora.
I,
Namora is
I
actually the metallurgist.
that would be hilarious. That would be a hilarious reveal. I don't think he would be a Wilder necessarily because he just
No.
seems like such a vicious
Yeah.
warhunter person that I think
Hello,
like
Dark Namora.
we do have the backstory for Dark Nemora. She doesn't count.
Oh man. Yeah, they don't actually say that the metallurgist dies. He just lays there and ready to accept his fate, I believe, at the end of the story, which
Exactly.
also available from the Esperia Chronicles, another story that we did a reading of, and if it's not up right this second, it will be soon. So look for that this week. The Metallurgist Diaries. That's a fun one. That's one of my favorite writings of any of the stories that I've read in the game so far. I really enjoy the Metallurgist Diaries.
And it reveals a lot about where Gaius went after blowing up his best friend, where he eventually did sort of rise to this top position
Oh
among the
yeah.
humans.
Oh yeah, it's integral to this story. The only reason that we're not doing it all in one piece is because we tried that this last weekend, and it took us all of 5.5 short hours to get through all the content.
It did. There
So
is definitely a lot.
yeah, so we are going to be releasing stories for all the future episodes early throughout the weeks. We'll put out Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, we'll be putting out stories like the readings that are in game and some maybe that aren't in game too. We'll figure it out as we go. And then that way you can read them yourself because a lot of you guys that are interested in lore probably are reading them yourselves anyway, which is another thing that Mysel pointed out to me that, if you're fascinated by the lore, you probably already read them. So this way we can get to the good stuff on the weekends on our episodes when we do it live. Where were we? We were Metallurgist
We were
Diary.
metallurgist,
Mm-hmm.
and it reveals what happened to Gaius after Haelus' story, where Gaius rose to power and
Right.
eventually was at the top of the food chain, you could say, pretty much ruling the human society, which is
Yeah,
interesting
it
because
is. Go ahead.
it is interesting because Gaius pretty much there's no mention of him having magic or having some extraordinarily technological abilities. That's all Haelus. So it looks like Gaius just kind of rose to power using Haelus's inventions and his
He,
own strength
this,
of personality.
yeah, he's rich and charismatic. That's
And
those are
we can
superpowers in our
see just
world.
and we can see just how charismatic he is from the metallurgist diary, where we hear about how, everybody looks up to him, everybody admires him. He's just this unattainable perfection, and he's viewed like that by even a lot of very smart people, because the metallurgist is a very intelligent person,
Right.
and he's completely enamored by Gaius. So
Yep.
there's definitely some sort of cult of personality going on.
Yep.
We learn from the metallurgist's diary that Gaius did well on the threat that he originally mentioned to Haelus, that he would fight the gods if they didn't give him the recipe to immortality, which for obvious
Right.
reasons they didn't give him. And so he tasked this team of scientists, we could say, to create weapons to take the gods out with. And on this team, we have the metallurgist, and we have his mentor, who I believe has a name, but I need to open it real quick.
In the metallurgist diary, you're
The
saying?
dean. He's referred to as the dean. So the dean and the metallurgist and their team, their laboratory, were tasked with creating these weapons to fight the Celestials, fight Gaius's war for immortality. And then we see that these weapons called Dusk and Dawn worked on paper but didn't actually work when they started to create them. And metallurgist, he thought, clearly the limitation there is because we're not using all we have. We could be using bioalchemy to make these weapons so much more powerful and achieve those desired results. But the dean thinks it's immoral, so he's holding us back. And it turns out that Gaius shares this idea, and actually, when he finds out that the dean is actively opposing potential power boost, he just beheads him on the spot.
Oh
And
yeah, that part is so
yeah,
cool.
everybody's just sort of okay with that, which I think
Yeah,
speaks volumes to the cult of personality going on, and to
absolutely it
just
does.
how much power and how much charisma Gaius has.
So much charisma, he could shoot somebody in the middle of Fifth Avenue
And everybody would just
and
stare at it
yeah.
instantly. Yeah. And at that point, the metallurgist takes over the project and begins experimenting on children and trying to fuse them with these weapons, with whatever it is that they created, make the children into weapons. And it doesn't go well as expected until he comes across Liberta and Lucilla. And actually, he originally wasn't experimenting on children, he was experimenting on adults, but he then realizes that
That they're little bodies. That's right. Is that in the diary too?
in the
I rem-
diary it says new organic entities require an old organic for fuel. So he decided that if he got younger test subjects, that might
right.
help
Yeah, I remember
with.
that's the takeaway from it. Sure.
Yeah, the takeaway was that he needs younger test subjects. And so that's what he does, and he begins experimenting on children.
Okay, I'm looking at it too now.
Lucilla is actually the first one who reaches connection with the weapon, with the power that he's trying to imbue into her, and she's experimental subject 637.
We've achieved a perfect symbiotic union between experimental test subject 637 and Dusk. Ah, oh, of course, yes.
He says that he's
Right.
expecting a similar successful result with Dawn, so that would be Liberta. Where
Where did
was it?
Dusk and
I was
Dawn come
just
from?
there.
Does he talk about that earlier in this story?
Yes. So Dusk and
That's what I
Dawn.
thought.
Those are the two. Those are the two weapons
Oh
that
yeah,
the
here.
Dean already
One okay,
designed.
we've crafted two prototypes. Okay, I see.
Uh huh.
My mind races with thoughts of my august future, given that at my age I've already been in the physical presence of our. Okay, I realize now history is like to me. I do believe, have every confidence that my prodigious abilities in metallurgy and alchemy will help forge this amazing weapon. We've already crafted two prototypes of the weapon. Our dean sketched out. One named Dusk, the other Dawn, but live demonstrations revealed a destructive power far less than what our great leader had envisioned. Okay, so it just crafted 2 prototypes of the weapon. Man, so there is like a weapon.
Like I said, they do have plans for the weapon that work on paper, but they just don't seem to work when they try to actually create them. But they do have like plans and they do have some sort of strategy that should work if realized correctly.
Using our mastery over the magical energies of the sun and the moon. As chief astral mage. I wonder if Trishea and her, isn't she an astral mage of some kind? It sounds close to what
So
she
she
does.
is a part of the Stargazers, which is a wilder organization.
Right.
Whereas when it comes to the word astral, we really see it more reflected in the Astral Academy,
Okay.
which is an academy that the Lightbearers and the Wilders founded together, and Mirael as well as Pippa actually studied there.
Okay.
But Mirael kind of left because she found the curriculum to be very boring and not actually developing her talents.
I remember
And
that.
Pippa was, I believe, kicked out because she is very clumsy and she caused a lot of chaos.
I remember that too. So you're saying that's not related to the kind of magic that they're using to make these weapons here?
I don't think it's necessarily related to that because the magic during the Age of Arcana is very different from the magic that anyone in Esperia can use these days. I can't find the part about the younger test subject.
I know it's in there too.
Oh, it's okay. I found it. It starts today marks the 7th in what is shaping up to be a long week of experiments, which have not, I must sadly write, gone as well as I'd expected. It may be a question of size. I suspect younger subjects may be needed.
Yeah, I'm over here trying to process because there's more information here than I thought there was about what dusk and dawn even mean. I didn't realize there was so much information about that.
There is a lot, yeah. Actually, speaking of, oh, I have just had a realization as well.
What's that?
So, dusk and dawn, it signifies their mastery over the sun and the moon.
Right.
There is, or rather, there used to be, a light bearer organization that was focused on arcane magic and specifically on magic from the Age of Arcana and trying to replicate the sort of magic level and the magic system from the time period. And it was called the Order of the Sun.
Uh-huh. Right.
And Odin, who is currently a Graveborn, was one of the leading magicians of his time in the Order of the Sun. And Odin is the reason also why the Order of the Sun is no longer really active. Because after what happened with Odin, after he started delving into necromancy,
Necromancy. Yep.
the church just kind of went completely against the Order of the Sun
You know,
and
churches,
completely
I've
destroyed
always
it.
had a stick up their ass about necromancy.
Not that I blame them, given the context of Esperia. Uh, but they pretty much trampled the Order of the Sun to the ground. It technically still exists, but it's practically useless, and they retreated mostly into the shadows and founded the Society of the Crow, which is what Morrow is a part of currently.
Right.
And they also had the Violet Orphanage, which is where Scarlet and not Sylvina, Isabella, Scarlet and Isabella were held for Scarlet set it on fire and escaped into the night. So again, we kind of return to that theme of experimenting on children and trying to make children extraordinarily powerful for their own means. So
Oh,
there
you
might be a
tied it back
connection
in. I was
there.
looking for it. I was like, where's the connection? You're so good.
There, and
Carry on.
it is also called the Order of the Sun, and we
Right.
know that control over the celestial bodies was a big thing during the Age of Arcana. So I think the connection is definitely there on multiple levels, and it's nice to see it all click together like this again.
Order of the Sun and these weapons coming from their primary magic sources, the magical energies of the sun and the moon.
Yeah. So again, another kind of. It seems like we might actually maybe get the metallurgist one day, and I am leaning into him being a light bearer, if not a hypogean, rather than a graveborn.
I
I will
really
change
like your
my.
idea of him being a hypogean. If he's a light bearer, he'd be like 3,000 years old.
He would, but we know that from Zafrael and Lucretia's union story, we know that Ansiel is alive, and Ansiel was offered
And
divinity. He
Ancelot,
rejected it. Ancelot,
yeah.
Ancelot, sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Ancelot.
Jeez,
Ancelot is
Mysel, read some lore.
so from Zafrael and Lucretia's union story, we know that Ancelot is still alive, and Ancelot was the first Lightbearer king who was offered divinity and rejected it.
Right.
And I don't think he would become a hypogean, but apparently
No.
he is still around, or at least he was still around
How do we know
several
that?
centuries.
How do we know that he's still around?
So he might not be around anymore, but he was still around several centuries after his supposed death. And we know that from Zafrael and Lucretia's union story, where Ancelot kind of recalls the story of Zafrael to this historian, because after what happened with Zafrael and Lucretia, Zafrael was completely shunned by the church, and every sort of mention of him was buried and forgotten eventually. And Zafran and Lucretia's story takes place, at the very least, several centuries after Dura created the Bard Gate, and Ancelot is then recalling this story. It is very deliberately set up that way, and it is a very deliberate choice.
Okay.
It is not something that I can write off as a simple mistake.
All right, and that's Ancelot and in relation to Zafrael and Lucretia?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. The Zaph and
So
Lucretia stuff might be a good one for us to do
might be good.
sometime. Yeah, we
It
should do
might be
that.
really good.
Yeah, there's a lot of
Um,
material there too.
and so if Ancelot can still be around centuries after he's supposed to be dead, I can't see a reason why somebody from the Age of Arcana with a lot more magic, a lot more knowledge, specifically knowledge about bioalchemy,
Yeah.
couldn't possibly make it.
Sure. Although when we last saw him, the metallurgist, he like lays down and waits for it all to end, right?
He
That's
does. He waits for either the Celestials to kill them or for the laboratory to crumble around him and kill him. We don't know what happened there. We don't have the exact ending. We know he was just sort of lying there waiting for his fate to come to him. But who knows what happens? Perhaps the Celestials took him, and in an ironic twist of fate, we'll see him come back as Celestial. I think that would be hilarious. I don't think it will happen, but it could. It's not off the table. We have seen in the War of Truth specifically, we have seen that Celestials are not beyond wiping people's memories clean. So they could have taken him because they took Haelus for mostly for his talents, for what he could offer to them. And seeing as the metallurgist was the one who created the divine weapons Dusk and Dawn that the Celestials also wanted and supposedly spent millennia looking for after they were lost, perhaps they could have brought the metallurgist to their side, wiped his memories, and might use him to create more weapons for them. Who knows? It
yeah,
definitely sounds like something they
that
would
sound I
do.
was just gonna say that. That sounds like something they would do. It absolutely does. You are right about that.
So that is another possibility how we may see this person return.
Okay. Yo, yeah, I definitely think he could come back. I think there's a good chance that's why they changed or removed the name Nikolai from the game just to leave it open-ended for themselves.
It is
'Cause
possible.
yeah, I'm like entranced by this specifications around Dusk and Dawn. So he says that it's based on humans' control over the magical energies of the sun and the moon, their mastery of
Hmm.
it. The dean, which is his boss, the chief astral mage of the court,
Indeed.
sketched out Dawn and Dusk. Is it the dean of where? Of a school? Of the academy of what's it?
We we don't know. They don't
They just
tell
say
us
the
that. They just
academy,
call
huh?
him the dean.
The dean of the academy.
They,
Yeah,
no, there's no academy at this point.
that's not true. I've heard the dean is currently selecting students from the academy.
Oh, all right. My bad. My bad. You're right. I don't have it open right now. You're right. Then I thought I'm still at the
You're
Astral
thinking of
Academy, so
the
like
Astral
that's one
Academy,
thing.
right? This is not that.
You know,
That's a good
the
point.
Astral. Yeah, this is long before the
Excellent
Astral Academy.
clarification, Mysaldate.
That's a different academy.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Okay. I've heard the dean is currently selecting students from the academy for a personal audience with our mighty leader. The dean just took me for an audience. Okay, yeah. This result is not unexpected given our dean's overly conservative methodology. So he doesn't like that his boss is being conservative either.
He calls it conservative, but it should be called having morals.
That's true. Yeah.
Because the metallurgist idea of progress and, novelty includes experimenting with children and killing
Yes.
600 of them. So,
That's a good point because they're test subjects 637. Huh.
yeah.
Oh, wow. I
Yeah.
never thought about what that means. Nice application of lore and story there, Mysel. Really nice.
I remember seeing that number and just thinking, holy shit.
Yeah.
Or
600
thinking,
dead
oh dear.
children. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the metallurgist calls it
Casually
overly conservative. If
not
only
wanting
my
to sacrifice 600 children makes you overly conservative.
Yes, if only my co-contributor had the sense to adopt my plan. Okay, so then he gets his head lopped off. Then the dean gets his head lopped off.
Yes.
Yep. And our metallurgist takes over. Today marks the 7th in what is shaping up to be a long week of experiments which have not, I must sadly write, gone as well as I'd expected. It may be a question of size. I suspect younger subjects may be needed. New organic entities require an old organic for fuel. It is a sacrifice, yes, but one eminently necessary for the future of human civilization. Only by endowing real intelligence into Dusk and Dawn shall we be able to wield its full strength and turn. All right, so they really aren't any more specific than they took the magic from human mastery over the sun and the moon and nicknamed these two quote unquote weapons as Dusk and Dawn. But just so my impression, right? So let me see if this is yours. My impression is that it's like some kind of powerful concentration of magic which can be activated through the magic machinery of the Cradle of Truth. I don't
Not
know.
necessarily activated. It seems like the Cradle of Truth can sort of charge it up and amplify its effects.
Okay.
But other than that, I do agree. That's what
Okay.
it seems to be.
Yeah. And then when he's adding intelligence to it, it's almost like it's a nuke, but when you add a human brain to it, then they can target that nuke and use it like a weapon, I guess, right? Like a giant freaking laser, but with a brain.
I suppose so. That's what it sounds like.
Yeah, that is kind of what they show with Liberta and Lucilla in the various visual interpretations of it. I had not seen that Lucilla music video thing where she's fighting all the Celestials.
I love the visuals. I love that even though what is happening is brutal in there, the way that the camera kind of sweeps and pans and the changes in visuals, how they make them look like chess pieces and all that, it
Yes.
makes it not feel so brutal and so graphic, and it's really more focused on Lucilla's inner turmoil, and she meets with Liberta, and it's that whole emotional mess that the two of them are. And the lyrics are great too, and what I really like is that the lyrics don't do the thing that they unfortunately did with the Lucretia video, where it was very one-sided and showing one piece out of context. In this case, the lyrics are very open that hey, both of these sides are very bad. Hypogeans are very selfish, they only focus on their greed, and the Celestials, they don't care about, who falls for their grand goals. And both sides are terrible. There's not really a good side in this conflict.
Yeah, for sure.
But it is a great video in general. It is just a great video, great song. I wish they did one for Liberta as well, especially because of that visual piece with
He
like
comes in at
the
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 end
twins.
somewhere. He's in it. Yeah, he looks cool.
He is in there in the end, but I just wish they did more of like a Liberta centric video as well on top of the Lucilla one, especially because of the music box thing where you can see both of the twins there, and we kind of really only see what happens to like the Lucilla doll as she sort of falls down, but we don't really get to see much of what happens to the Liberta doll. And overall, it's very much a video about Lucilla and Lucilla's point of view. There Liberta is there. She does meet him at the end of it, but I just wish we got more. But that might also just be because I wish we got more of Liberta and Lucilla in general.
Yeah.
Because I love their story, I love the narrative, I love what it has to offer. So where did we end? Metallurgist. So
We're probably done with Metallurgist Diary at this
we
point,
probably
right?
are almost. Almost. There's a little bit more there.
Okay.
So after he succeeds with fusing Lucilla and then Liberta to the weapons, that is around the time, he constructs the Cradle of Truth to sort of power and amplify these weapons' powers. And that is where somebody leaks the information and the Celestials come down to strike them down. And his sort of last ditch effort to make the situation, not so easy on the Celestials. He seals the weapons, he seals the children in these time capsules,
Right.
and hides them. And then
Mm-hmm.
he sort of just lies there waiting for the Celestials to come to him as the lab crumbles down around him. Very cool.
Very emotional, like emo music video. Like laying there waiting for it to come crumbling down around. It's such a music video.
It really is, yeah. And then for 2 millennia, Celestials keep looking for the weapons and can't find them, and then finally, they figure out where they are, and they are trying to keep it hush hush, because obviously the Hypogeans also know about these weapons, and so they're also looking for them. And so when Celestials finally do find them, they try to keep it hush hush and not let anybody know. But the Hypogeans do end up finding out, and for a brief period of time, these time capsules with the children end up in the hands of Conrad, who is a Hypogean commander. And that is where we enter Gavus and Eugene, where Gavus suspects that Eugene was part of the group that stole the weapons. Even though Eugene is not and has really no idea what's happening, he's kind of forced to come along when Gavus
Right.
connects them with
That's right.
with these
Eugene isn't
messages.
actually, yeah. So when they first meet, Eugene isn't actually, we don't know what Eugene was doing, right? But he wasn't
We
searching
don't
for
know
the
what he was
kids.
doing.
Yeah, he was just in
Yeah,
the forest being a hypogen, doing his hypogen thing.
doing
And
his own thing,
Zafriel is
and
just like
suddenly there's
on
a
edge, man. He's ready to pounce. He's just like, yeah, and grabs him, slaps the handcuffs on. And he's like, you wait, you were going
it's
for the
amazing.
weapons, right?
Yeah,
Handcuff
you
first,
tell me
ask
where the
questions
weapons
later.
are. Eugene is like, you got the wrong person.
Yep.
I have no idea what you're talking about. Eugene is actually being surprisingly rational at the start. He's just trying to calmly explain. Not so calmly, he's a little panicked, but trying to explain, that he has really nothing to do with this. Gavus has this very strange idea that because they're all Hypogeans, clearly that means they're all united, just like the Celestials are, just because they are Celestials.
Sure. I don't know if it's that
And
strange, but like it's wrong.
it's wrong, exactly.
Yeah,
It is wrong. And I think that kind of shows that Gavus is sort of naive, despite being very serious and very
absolutely. Great
well
point.
respected among the Celestials.
Mm-hmm.
He's sort of naive, and he doesn't really know much outside of what he's been taught.
The Celestials don't make a lot of room for really exploring other beings, or they just kind of
They
assume this.
don't. They
Yeah,
don't.
they make that classic
It's
mistake of assuming superiority, and then that leads to like disinterest in the others that you assume are lesser,
I
and then
I wouldn't say in Gavus's case specifically it's this interest. I feel like it more feels like somebody who's been shielded from the real
no,
world.
that's what I mean is like their doctrine, because he's still pretty young in
It
the realm of
really
Celestials,
is.
right? So this is just like how they raise other Celestials.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen that that's not the case for all of the older gods like Damia, who kind of wander the mortal realm. So it seems like the older gods are free to come and go as they please, but the
Mm.
younger gods are kind of just confined to the mountain
Mm-hmm.
peaks, spending all their free time with other celestials, and that naturally warps their point of view of how other factions work. So when Gavus sees Eugene, he sees a Hypogean and immediately just assumes that all Hypogeans are as closely working together as the Celestials are, which obviously isn't true. And he obviously also believes, all Hypogeans do is lie. So when Eugene tells him that he's not involved and he has no idea what's going on, obviously Gavus is not going to trust him.
Right.
And so it is like a small interaction, but I think it really speaks volumes to both of their characters, where Eugene is actually not combative at all, and he's very easygoing and very, very eager to really. He would help out because he doesn't really care what happens to Conrad and the other Hypogeans, but he also can't really help. And so it's just this strange dynamic that eventually, evolves into something a lot more intriguing, but it's already a very good start to this story and to this relationship. And so as we go on, Gavus and Eugene eventually do track down Conrad and manage to retrieve the weapons, but then they seem to fall into this underground maze, underground cave, and we don't know exactly what happens there. Because something happens that leads to the children getting hurt or wounded and gradually getting much, much weaker. And then, as they sort of escape these caves, Gavus calls on his fellow Celestials, thinking that they will just heal these children and not make them into weapons. And then the next thing we know, they are on the run. So we don't really have much detail on what happened there yet.
Right, but that's exactly what the webcomic has been exploring, right? So
Exactly, exactly.
the prologue of the webcomic, the very beginning,
The very beginning showed us Conrad sort of ambushing the Celestial convoy and getting the weapons for himself. Then in the first chapter, we meet with Gavus and his mentor Morgana, and Gavus is sent to retrieve the weapons or destroy them. It's impossible to retrieve them. And then he meets Eugene. And then in the second chapter, we get to see a bit more of Eugene and Gavus's first interaction. We see Eugene trying to keep the peace and being reasonable, and Gavus just not having any of it. And we see Eugene immediately adapting and going straight into annoying Gavus as much as he can.
and oh shoot, I had a question for you. And then at the end of chapter 1, he's got him like with his face down. I'm not who you're looking for. And then chapter 2.
Chapter 2, they talk a bit more. Well, more like Eugene tries to talk, and Gavus is very, very short with him. And Gavus connects them with the scales of benevolence.
Right. I thought of my question,
And
by the way.
yeah, what is it?
So there's that cool video. Is that's basically this, right? This chapter 2? Isn't this kind of what's in the animated video of their meeting?
So the animated video, it goes beyond just their meeting, but yes, it does use scenes from the webcomic, but with some changed wording. For example, in the video, Gavin says, "I will not be sweet talked by a Hypogean." But
Right.
that's not what he says in the webcomic because they changed the wording there.
Thwack. Again, it's my favorite comic book word. Thwack. I think I said that this weekend when we were looking at the first one. They used it again in chapter 2. Thwack.
They don't have the kids yet, right? Their kids are
No, they don't. They
no,
don't.
they
The
don't have the
kids are at
weapons.
this point in the time capsules which Conrad has. And the kids will not be found until after Gavus and Eugene obtain the time capsules and then get knocked by Conrad into this underground maze area.
Okay.
That's where they open the time capsules and find the children.
Got you.
We kind of get a little bit of insight into what happens after this fall down from Eugene's journal in the War of Truth event, where he talks about, the children getting hurt and getting weaker and weaker, and Gavus saying that he will just call on his fellow Celestials to heal the children. And Eugene is very skeptical and he's kind of worried, saying that, I don't think this is something that we should do, but I'm willing to trust Gavus and see if I'm wrong. And that is after they're no longer magically connected. So the timeline would go as they fall into the pit, the scales of benevolence get broken, they find the children. They cannot disconnect from each other at this point because the scales are broken. The underground pits, they manage to repair the scales, disconnect. I assume that's where they kind of left the pits, but the timeline is unclear at
We'll
that
find
point,
out.
so we
Yeah.
can't be sure. But at some point, they disconnect from each other. Eugene leaves, finds that he really misses Gavus and the children, so he comes back to them. Then at some point, the children get injured and keep growing weaker and weaker, and Gavus and Eugene don't know what to do. Gavus decides to call on his fellow Celestials to come and heal the children. And Eugene is very skeptical and he
Yeah,
doesn't
that's a
really
bad call.
think it's a good idea, but he's willing to trust Gavus
And it ends up being
see
a
if
really
maybe
bad call.
a very bad call, but we don't know exactly what happens. All we know from Eugene's story in game is that he lost his journal there for some reason. We don't really know how it happened. It
Right.
probably has to do with the Celestials that Gavus called on.
Right. And then his non-gay, completely platonic male friend buys him a new journal.
After approximately 2 or 3 years of just listening to him every night, telling him about his day, yes.
Right. After, yeah.
It's if it was, a week, maybe a month, but if it takes you that long, at that point you were just enjoying it and
Uh-huh.
you just can't excuse it to yourself any longer. But yeah, so we know that Eugene loses his journal there. And then the next information we have is from when they reach the Lightbearer Empire. They are on the run at this point from both the Hypogeans and the Celestials. They have made a decision to keep the children and not hand them over to be made into weapons, to be treated as weapons for their whole lives. And they reach the Lightbearer Empire. They don't have any money. Children are starving. Gavus and Eugene don't know how to cook because they do not need
Right,
to
because
eat.
they're a god and a demon, essentially. And
Pretty much.
yeah.
And again, we see Gavus being a very naive and pure-hearted person because he assumes that they can just ask for help and people will help them because that's what the light teaches. That's how they should be, right?
Not only that, but he's not very good at it and he doesn't want to, and it makes him uncomfortable because he's only ever been taught that they should be devout to humans.
That they should be helping them,
Right.
yes, and they shouldn't be asking for help.
Right.
Which
Makes him
obviously is a
Yeah.
very unhealthy mindset, and especially in a situation like this. But Eugene finally manages to convince him to at least ask for help. Gavus, obviously, he doesn't show who he is. He doesn't allow Eugene to show who he is. And they're just not given anything in the city. It's not actually until they leave the city and they reach just some remote farmland where people actually start helping them, not to get something back out of it, but just to help them because
So-
they have 2 starving children.
When Gavus asks his celestial brethren for help, the end result of that is what? Is that they come and they have to fight them off or something? But it's not when they get
I
captured?
think so. So we don't know what the end result of that is. That's not when they got captured, though.
Okay.
No. That is before they go on the run, before they reach the Lightbearer Empire, before they even have a house together. That is before all of that.
And then now we're in the rural area. They've got the kids
They've
from
got the
the
kids.
mm-hmm.
They've left they left the city in the Liber Empire because nobody would help them. They reach this rural area. Finally, people start acting like decent human beings and
Mm-hmm.
helping the two clearly starving children. And that is where Gavus first gets the idea to hide in the Dark Forest, because the Dark Forest is a very magical place and it could help hide their presence at least for a while. And so they reach the dark forest after that and they settle down, they build their own house, and that's where we kind of get Eugene's character story, where after a while of living there, Gavus buys him a new diary, a new journal, because it turns out Eugene has some severe memory issues and doesn't actually remember much of his past, and that one of the reasons that he either has a journal or tells Gavus what happens is because he doesn't want to forget what happened during his days. Or at least that's what's implied. It's not explicitly spelled out, but it's implied. And that's where they start living together and raising the children. That's where the kind of setting of the music video for them comes in, during this time where
Right.
they take care of the children, they raise the children. It's the happiest time of pretty much all of their lives.
I got that picture. Give me 1 sec.
Uh-huh. It's such a good picture. I mean, everything in that video is obviously, but it's such a good picture.
All right, so I've got some visual aids here. So we've got Gavus tackling Eugene on sight before he attaches himself to him. And then I got the stained glass window up here, where did you say the stained glass window comes in?
So each awakened hero has that.
Oh, yeah,
If
they
you
do, don't
remember,
they?
they do. They have that, and we always have like little connected quests in the upcoming week, leading up to the stained glass art, where we get to see, what's happening in Esperia, what's currently going on, and how people are reacting to these new circumstances connected to the new awakened hero, or heroes in this case.
What do you mean, how people are reacting?
Well, so for example, when it was leading up to awaken Saphia, as you know, her awakening came from the meteorite fragment that fell down on Esperia. And so in the quests leading up to her stained glass window, we had all these different factions and all these people reacting to the meteor fall that was happening at the time. And this ties back even further. Let me see. I have screenshots. I can prove this.
You can prove what? What are you gonna
I
prove?
can prove my claims.
What claim? What are you talking about? What are you trying to say?
So, okay, I'm trying to say that if you read the quests
Uh-huh.
that have the feathers, let you fill out the stained glass art and the other quests on that same tab, oftentimes these quests are very connected with the awakened hero and what's going on. So this one, I believe, was around the time that, let me send it to you. I think this was Belinda, because it's a light bearer, so it was either Belinda or Thane. But I think this was Belinda because we know the name Corruptors now, so that had to have been Belinda. Have you heard? The Corruptors attacked the Noble Tavern a couple nights ago. Poor Dolly escaped from harm, but only barely. Yada yada. So it tells you, the Elemental Strife storyline, it dealt with the Corruptors. Boom, there's a quest about the Corruptors.
Oh my gosh, I was like wondering what you mean by quests. You're talking about those things.
Yeah, I am.
Oh, wow. What? Those are related to what's going on?
Those
I
are always related
never,
to what's going on.
ever, ever, ever have I read those. Not never, not ever. Wow. That is so cool. Wait, okay. So,
I have some from Awakened Chimera as well that talk about somebody robbing graves, which we learned was Ivan, and all that. It's pretty, not all of them are connected, but most of them are. This is another one from Awakened Chimera that again talks about mysterious figures going in and out of the boneyard, stealing skeletal remains and roaming spirits. We even got Silas having beef with Ivan in these quests, which is hilarious. Everybody's, freaking out, well, who's stealing all these corpses? Meanwhile, Silas knows that, oh, it's the guy who makes puppets, but I'm better than him, right?
I did not know that. That's great.
I've never felt so strong!
Oh man, I love Silas.
Yeah, he is hilarious, yeah.
You'll be my next subject!
All of these quests, usually, most of the times, date back to the current awakened heroes. So for Gavus and Eugene, again, it's split. Just like Shamira's was split, theirs is split between their storyline and the Midwinter festivities that this year are going to be mostly paid for and hosted by the twins, apparently. There we see, for example, with Tassie's quest talks about it. Tassie heard that recently the Celestials and Hypogeans have been wreaking havoc to hunt fugitives of their factions.
I will never do this to you again, but you have gotta say Tassie for me.
Tassie?
Tassie.
Tassie?
Yeah.
Tassie.
Yeah. Tassie sounds very, I don't know, rural. Like did you
That's
get those new
actually
spells from Tassie?
no, no, no. Here we
That
have
dang
with
fairy
Eloar.
Tassie gonna put me to sleep.
Oh no. Here we have the Eloard quest. A celestial messenger brought word that traces of 4 fugitives have been detected in the Lightbearer Empire. And again, this refers to Gavus, Eugene, Liberta, and Lucilla.
That is so cool. So that's one of them right now?
Yeah, that's one of them right now.
Oh man, that's cool.
They made it to the Dark Forest, they made a house, and they stayed there for approximately 3 years before they got discovered and captured, and the children got taken away. I'm trying to think, where was it, because one of the stories implied that the Hypogeans and the Celestials made a deal to wait for 10 years and then send the weapons against each other and see which one of them is more powerful. But I can't remember where exactly it was. I think it may have been. It's Liberta or Lucilla's story, but I'm not sure which one of them. But one of them mentions that there was a deal made that in 10 years, they would clash. And that is where the War of Truth event comes in, where after these 10 years, where the twins' memories have been sealed away, so they do not remember each other, they do not remember their fathers. They've each been raised by a different faction, and now they are being sent against each other in the Cradle of Truth that, as we established, charges and amplifies their powers
Mm-hmm.
to face off against each other and hopefully wipe the other side out. But as we saw during the War of Truth event, as we go around and we start collecting the diary pages, both Liberta and Lucilla begin to slowly remember their past, just in glimpses, nothing
Yeah,
really.
I remember that as I was working with Lucilla during the event. I liked that how they incorporated us into the story.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was amazing, and I think it also really well showcased the personalities of the twins, the sides of them that were similar, the sides of them that were different, as well as how each faction is inherently damaging to children and how children really should not be in contact with either of these factions.
Yeah, no kidding.
But I really, really liked it. I liked that, as we read before in Eugene's diary, the twins did show some personality before when they were younger, and then really the factions that they got taken in by amplified some of their traits that on their own aren't bad to a degree where they became really bad. So we had Lucilla, who was very energetic and a little selfish, but ultimately she did care about Liberta a lot, and she was nice. She just kind of was a little impulsive and a little selfish. And we saw how the Hypergeans made her think that, nobody will care about you unless you're the best, and you should just trample over everybody to get their attention.
Yeah, they played on what her,
What her innate sort of weakness
yeah,
was.
I was
And
just, yep.
similarly,
Mm-hmm.
Liberta has always been very meek and very sort of timid.
Dutiful, I would say. Dutiful would be a word that you could use to describe how they like manipulated him in that, like, oh, this is what you're destined to do. Morgana is definitely the kind of person that would prey on him.
Definitely. Liberta ended up being this sort of person who feels guilty for eating food he likes because,
Yep.
oh, now he's being selfish because he's enjoying the food, So,
yes.
and that's actually what happens. Like during the event, you bring him candy at some point, and he confesses that he feels like it's a sin that because he likes it so much, and he feels like that's not something that would be allowed. And so both of them have very serious problems at this point because of their upbringing there. And then as they fight, they start remembering each other, and they have this feeling that the other person, the other person they clash with, is really familiar for some reason, but because of their sealed memories, they can't quite place each other where they are, where they should be, what their relationship is. And they start remembering Gavus and Eugene and what they told them, but again, can't quite place them. And then comes the final showdown, and as they clash and kind of unleash a lot of their power at once, it is actually enough to break the seals on their memories. And in that split second, they remember each other and immediately start working together. And I really like that. It really shows that underneath all those, those full 10 years of manipulation and was essentially brainwashing, they
Yeah.
still care about each other and they still understand each other so intimately that they can just, split second. They just need a split second to immediately know what they're going to do next. And so what they did next was that they sort of escaped during the chaos. They left us a letter, each of them did, and it was very sweet of them. And I
Did
do
they?
have both
Wait,
letters
where's these
screenshot.
letters? What letters?
So if you went to like the event interface
Yeah.
after the final cutscene, there was a letter from the twin that you worked with.
Okay.
I have to screenshot it. If you didn't get yours, I can show you what it said. If you didn't get yours, I did play through both Lucilla and Liberta's plotline, so
Right.
I can send you screenshots
And they
of
sent
Lucilla's
a
letter.
message to us to say they took off, but they wished us well or something. Really?
Yeah, they did. They sent
That's
us a letter
nice.
informing us of what happened, telling us, hey, I recovered my memories. The person that I fought with is actually my long lost siblings, and now we're going to save our fathers, and we'll just be a family again.
Wow.
And and it was a very sweet letter from both of them, and again showcased a lot of their personality and the bonds that they've developed with the player through this event.
I thought those were so well crafted, man. I really felt like I had a relationship with Lucilla by the end of it. I did, man. And she loved to get told off. I
did
tell
too,
you what. She liked it so much when you would like give her shit about stuff. Whereas if you gave her the nice replies, she was always so just like eye rolling and didn't care. But if you gave her shit, then yeah, it was great.
Because that's what she's been missing, because the Hypergeans, they didn't give her any boundaries, and
Right.
children do need some boundaries to feel secure in the world.
Yep.
So that's what she was missing. And on the other hand, Liberta had the opposite problem, where he was only given boundaries and absolutely no freedom whatsoever. And so in Liberta's case, sort of emphasizing the fact that, hey, if you don't like things, you can say that. If you like things, you can say that. You can do things that you enjoy. That was what elicited positive responses from Liberta.
Cool.
because
Very
that's
cool.
what he was lacking. So,
Yeah.
and I think it also shows a lot about how the factions work, how the Celestials have this sort of rigid order that they follow, especially the lower ranked Celestials or the Celestials who don't have much authority are kind of stuck in this very rigid, very strict system that's enforced by the old Celestials, by the old gods. And on the other hand, Hypogeans just kind of are very much each on their own.
Very
They
little,
don't
yeah,
really
very
work
little structure. It's a
very
lot of
yeah,
chaos.
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
It's very little structure. It's a lot of
I
chaos.
mean, they're born of chaos, right? Their whole purpose is to return the world to like void nothingness.
Exactly. And that's why also we have such a wide variety of Hypogeans who, for the most part, have no relation to each other whatsoever.
Right.
Meanwhile, with the Celestials, we see names that pop up over and over and over again. We always see Anciel, we always see Dura, they always come up in almost everybody's stories,
Sure.
almost every Celestial stories.
Yeah, you know, the lack of
Hypogeans.
structure that the Hypogeans have is evidenced in the fact that Eugene's wandering the forest and Gavus grabs him and he just assumes that Eugene knows, like we talked about earlier, that he knows what's going on. And Eugene has no idea.
And he doesn't even care. That's
Nope.
the thing. Like, you know,
Yep.
not only does he have no idea, but he doesn't even want to have any idea.
Right.
He knows who Conrad is because he has some personal beef with him, but he has no idea about any divine weapons.
Is that in
or
chapter
claws
2
or what?
of the comic?
Yeah, that's
The
in
personal
chapter
beef?
2.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. And so it's not like all Hypogeans have no structure. They do have commanders. Conrad is a commander. Cain is a commander. So there is some structure there.
Yeah.
But the
Important point.
intelligent Hypogeans, the ones who were created after Anai's fall from grace, those are for the most part very standoffish, very self-sufficient, let's say.
Anai's unfair fall from grace, which we will get into
Yes.
on another
Yes.
episode of the Esperia Chronicles here on AFK
sure,
with Danger
sure.
Grey. Yeah, we've got a lot of great stories to get into with all of these, but we're trying to. Unfortunately, we need to keep it to this one this time. So you guys will just have to come back and see us again if you want to learn more. There's so much more. I could do backstory history for Esperia all day long. I want so badly to see. You could do several different animes of the lore content that there already is with the amount of story that they have. Like you could do different eras of anime in different like eras of this world, and they would all hold up so well. I'd love to see the story of Gaius and that whole time period with the metallurgist. Wouldn't that be such a cool series to oh man.
It would.
Oh, it'd
Maybe
be
if
so
we get
neat.
the metallurgist as a character, they might give us a webcomic for him as well.
Yeah.
I doubt it, but they could.
Oh man, that'd be so cool.
Closing out, we're
yeah.
almost at the end. So
Right.
After the twins left in the final cutscene of the War of Truth, we see them go and save Eugene, and we get more details of that whole rescue mission in the new Voyage of Wonders. It is wonderful. I will not spoil too much of it, so I will not go into details, but the interactions with the family are amazing, a lot of fun. It has a lot of fun mechanics.
Where does it take place time-wise?
Right after the cutscene where the twins go to save Eugene, it details the rescue mission, like I said.
That's so much fun.
It really is. It's great. We get to interact with both Conrad and Morgana. Not with words, but we get to see them.
Do we see... I am just obsessed with this jail that they have Gavus in. That celestial...
Unfortunately not.
Oh, it's so neat. If you haven't seen it, go check out the Gavus story, Gavus, Keeper of Order, where I did the story reading for him, and in the intro of it, it's got a shot of him in this celestial jail a couple of times over here. If you look for the Esperia Chronicles Gavus episode, And then it's also that is taken from this Order in Chaos video that the official AFK Arena account posted a day before that, just 2 days ago, 3 days ago. And it's a really, really neat montage of a lot of things, actually. I mean, it's centered around Gavus and Eugene, but I know you were excited, Mysal. I'm pretty sure the reason you freaked out when it first released and you were messaging me about it is that it has Damon in it. Am I right? Was it because of the Damon pre-death scene? Is that why you were geeking, or just for the whole thing?
It was the whole thing. Really.
Yeah.
I do love Damon. I adore Damon.
Did you see he still has his little band-aid on his head? What's up with that?
I did. So Damon, we'll get into this definitely another time.
Yeah.
But Damon was very sick long before his death.
Oh, I vaguely knew that. I feel like that's everything
Damon
with us.
Damon has always been a very sickly child, and it got a lot worse.
I'll say.
Get into it.
Bro, I know. But then Ivan made him all better, right?
Oh, you are so lucky you're so far away from me.
All right. This is so much fun. I can't wait to do it again.
But yeah, so then we have the rescue mission, and then after they rescued Eugene and Gavus, they are now on the run again. And from what it seems like, they decided to throw a party for their dads with the midwinter festivities. They are throwing a feast. You know, it seems a little bit irresponsible since they're on the run from two whole factions. You would assume they would be trying to stay low to not get too much attention, but instead they're out there throwing a feast. We went into talk about how in lore, Liberta and Lucilla currently are just extremely powerful. There isn't really anyone who could potentially stop them since they were made as the weapons that have the power to reshape continents and tear apart the sky.
Right.
And they are fully charged right now from the Cradle of Truth. Their powers are fully amplified.
Nukes with a brain.
Exactly. So them throwing a party right after breaking their dads out of jail is actually not really that irresponsible. They can afford to.
Oh yeah, because who's gonna absolutely
who's going to stop them? Seriously.
I tell you what, that's a guest list I want to be on.
We will be, thanks to it being a playable event.
Hey.
Hey. Personally, my favorite part from the patch notes video that showed a bit of the event is just Lucilla calling Eugene old man.
He's probably hundreds of years old now.
He definitely is. We don't know exactly how old. That's actually an interesting thing, a very funny thing. So when the AFK Arena official Instagram posted about Gavus and Eugene, that was the first, official confirmation we got of them. And they released their the little animations that awakened heroes get when they cast their ultimates. And they always add like a little bit of description about the hero. And for Gavus, they talked about his backstory. They talked about how he used to be such a respected celestial and whatnot. Now he's a fugitive. For Eugene, they stated two things. We don't know how old he is, and his relationship with Gavus is a secret. Those were the only things they told us about Eugene on that announcement.
Yeah, it's I mean, secret is a strong word.
It is not secret to us because we're privy to a lot of the details, but
listen, I'm just gonna bring up the stained glass picture here. I'm just gonna let it.
Yeah,
I'm just gonna let the.
And then the animated video also is quite a lot, with their hands reaching out for each other, and then clasping together.
Well,
in
but
spirit.
I know. And then someone said to me that when they clasp, their hands become Liberta and Lucilla's, and like that is kind of true, but come on,
It kind of is, but the imagery is very obvious.
The imagery is I think the imagery is clear. Yeah.
Very clear.
I love it.
Yes, the relationship is a secret.
mhm,
Definitely from the Chinese government.
yeah. That's the secret. And on that note, I think we'll end there.
I think we will, yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining me to do this again. We tried to do this weekend, and it
Hey,
like
we cut it down to like
yeah.
3 hours.
I know, right? Now it's down to only 3 hours. Now I'll be able to edit this down, Mysal, to
No,
like
obviously we talked about a lot of things around it, so
yeah. So I'll be able to edit it down. Honestly, like if we do this, it'll be great.
it'll be a lot of work, but it'll be great.
Good stuff, man. That was great.